All right, ladies and gentlemen, Ted Arnaud is with us on the AT&T Newsline. We're at Jimmy Joe Savage's Legacy Studios. Before we talk Donald Trump, I want to also just send some thoughts and prayers to former President George H. Bush. He was admitted to the hospital today, and also his wife Barbara dealing with fatigue. And I thought I'd give Ted a chance to talk about the legacy of truly one of the best Americans ever, former head of the CIA and also a military veteran, George H. Bush. What a legendary individual, and also a pretty successful entrepreneur, Ted.
Yes, he comes from a great family. Don't forget he was shot down in the Pacific just before the invasion of Japan and the atomic bombs in Hiroshima and Nagasaki. He was shot down, recovered, pulled out of the water by his troops, and luckily for him, I guess, they got film of it. But you're talking to a guy, they were saying a lot about Hillary Clinton, how she had the most experience of a person running for president. Certainly she had a lot of experience. But you go through George H.W. Bush, you're talking about head of the CIA, ambassador, congressman. You're talking about all of the things that he put together on his resume. And I would have to say that if you really look at it, he was the most experienced person that ever run for president.
And of course, vice president with Ronald Reagan as well. Now, 45th president swearing in is coming up noon Friday Eastern, White House Capitol steps by Chief Justice John Roberts. Of course, CBS Radio News with the coverage. You'll hear it on News Radio 1020 KDKA. And of course, from the speech to the inaugural balls, the entertainment, everything, the pomp and circumstance, we will have it all for you. Ted, being that he comes from a bit of an entertaining background, you think this one will have a lot of glitz to it and glamour?
I think it'll have less glitz and glamour than what Obama's first and second inaugural would be. First of all, Obama's first one was attended by 1.8 million people in Washington. Second, around 800,000. That's about what they expect for Trump. But I think you're going to see Trump want to get through as much of the glitz and glamour as he can and get down to business. I mean, this is a guy who lives through glitz and glamour, so this is not going to faze him, that part of it. I'm sure there's going to be butterflies, even as high profile as he is, there's going to be butterflies when he puts his hand on that Lincoln Bible. But I think this is a guy who wants to get down to business and wants to get rid of a lot of the other accoutrement, if you will, of the inauguration, and show that he's the business guy who wants to create change in America.
All right, some of the things that Mr. Trump, our future president as of this Friday, would like to accomplish in his first 100 days. Some of your thoughts. Term limits for Congress. You think it could happen?
No. First of all, it has to be voted on by Congress. It's like the fox getting into the chicken coop. That's not going to happen. I mean, it's a great sentiment, and I think there's a lot of Americans who believe that it would be a great thing, but that's not going to happen, even though it's what our founding fathers intended, that there be a civilian Congress and legislature. That's one that's not going to happen.
Hiring freeze on all federal employees.
Well, that's something he can do by presidential decree. So that's something that very well might happen. But I think he's got to get in there and really, rather than saying hiring freeze on all employees, he's going to have to be somewhat circumspect and figure out which organizations are more sensitive to both our safety and our economy than others. And I think he'll be looking at maybe not all, but certainly segments of the government sector might be going through a hiring freeze.
Every new federal regulation, 2 existing regulations eliminated. Can that happen?
It could happen, but it won't happen. I mean, there's going to be certain high-profile regulations that have really been detrimental to small and big businesses, and I think he's going to be able to change a lot of those. But some of it are legislative in nature, and that's going to take Congress enacting the legislation. And we've all seen that the wheels of Congress grind very slowly. So I don't think that's one that'll happen in its entirety, but I think he can put a big dent in some of the more regressive regulations that are out there that are inhibiting business right now.
5-year ban on White House and congressional officials becoming lobbyists after leaving office, waiting at least 5 years before they become lobbyists. Possibility?
That's one under his control. He can do that, and he can certainly make that a provision of employment or a provision of any kind of appointment, and he has certainly the ability to do that. So I think that's something that you will see for his staff. Unfortunately, the bulk of the people working in Washington are civil servants, and none of them are subject to such a prohibition. So while it has a great look to it, it may or may not be as effective as he wants it to be. Probably not.
Renegotiate NAFTA.
That's something that he's going to have to be very careful of. And I think what he's going to do, and when you listen to it, renegotiate, that means taking each provision and dissecting the provisions that are good for American business and fair, and those trade agreements that are not good for American business and may be deemed to be unfair. So I think he can renegotiate NAFTA, but that means taking it apart piece by piece and then putting it back together. So I think he's got a shot at that, but when the sound bites come out, it sounds like he's going to do away with NAFTA. That's not going to happen.
Some would say it's very timely, the following one, Obama-Clinton roadblocks, how he could really eradicate those roadblocks and help energy infrastructure projects.
Yeah, some of the recent things that Obama has done actually is part of old laws that are going to be harder to turn around than some of the other ones. But Keystone Pipeline and some of the other things, I think he can have a tremendous influence on. Certainly, he can have his director of the EPA choose not to enforce some of the regulations that they have and actually change the regulations. So I think you will see a much more energy-friendly environment, and I think that's going to be great for our area, all aspects of it, because of energy processing and energy development. So I think that's a big one.
Billions in payments to the UN for climate change programs. Can he eradicate them?
That's another one of the things. Can he eradicate it? No. Can he change it and have a positive influence with respect to the cost to the United States? I think so. But once again, to be binary in his approach, that it's either a 0 or a 1, I don't think that's going to work. I think you're going to see something in between. But it could, just by approaching it, just by addressing it the way he is, it can have a positive effect on certainly our economy and our country.
Businessman and community leader Ted Arnott, AT&T Newsline. We're at Jimmy Joe Savage's Legacy Studios. Coming up, we're going to be talking some NFL football. One more thing that he would probably like to accomplish in the first 100 days, cancel every unconstitutional executive action memorandum ordered by President Barack Obama. Fact, fiction?
Well, when you say unconstitutional, those executive actions are constitutional. Certainly, the president has it within his prerogative to execute those orders. But because they are just orders, they're just as easy to unexecute. And I think that's what you're going to see him doing. And whether or not they're constitutional is going to become irrelevant, because he can take those executive orders and just negate them or issue a contrary executive order that overrides what Obama has done. So the constitutionality of them doesn't even have to be argued. They just have to be changed.
Ted, in closing, before we shift gears here at Legacy Studios and talk NFL, you've known this guy a long time. He, like you, an entrepreneur. What do you think his message will be? Obviously, I believe pro-business during his inaugural speech.
I think that's exactly what it'll be. It'll be pro-business, pro-American, and it's going to make an attempt to try and include all Americans, much to the chagrin of some of his detractors. But I think he will reach out and try it and have a much bigger tent than what the Republican Party has had. And it's going to be tough. I mean, there are some real tough issues that are out there. Amnesty for illegal aliens or undocumented aliens. Some of the other issues that he has taken on, that they're going to be big. They're going to be very, very big. And so it's going to be a tough 100 days, but certainly that's why I think the pomp and circumstance, he wants to get through the pomp and circumstance and gets to work. And that's what an entrepreneur would do, a businessman would do. Okay, we've had our executive Christmas party, but we're going to be at the office at 6 o'clock in the morning, so be ready for it. So I think you're going to see that in Trump, but you also might see a lot of frustrations because he's working in a wheel that turns very slowly.
All right, Ted and I will come back just a couple of minutes. Stay with us. Don't touch that dial because it's all about the Steelers and New England next.